show dedicated to better health through natural living. Your producer and host, William G. Cooper. Bill's co-host, Dr. Conrad Mulfair, Jr.
I'm Dr. Conrad G. Mulfair, Jr.
And I'm Bill Cooper. Welcome again to Your Health. Today we're going to be looking at some instruments that are used, I guess, basically in chiropractic offices, in osteopathic offices, areas that subluxations and diagnostic procedures involved in that area. We have as our guest Ken Mattern from the Pennsylvania area. Ken?
Yes, Mifflinburg.
Again?
Mifflinburg.
Mifflinburg. I had to ask on that one again, Ken. Okay, how did you get involved in building this type of instrument?
Well, I was involved in electronics for a number of years. One day I went to my chiropractor. I had a pain in my back. And as I was there at the table, he took this box from a shelf and he put it against my back and he says, "Aha, you're hurt right there." And he dug his finger into my back and it hurt.
It hurt.
And I said, "How did you do that?" And he said, "Well, I had this little box here," and he says, "It takes temperatures along your spine, and it tells me that there's an injury at that point." And I said to him, I said, "Are you marketing these things?" He said, "No, I'm really not." And I said, "It seems to me that there should be a market for something like that." And he said, "Well, there is, but I haven't gotten into it." Last January, the man came back to me, and he said, "I'd like to market it, but I don't want to do all the work." He said, "Would you like to?" And I said, "Sure." And so we sat down, discussed the device, what we wanted to do with it, how to do with it, and I took it from there. And I found it was a lot more work than I thought.
I think that's always the case, Ken. I think that's always the case when you look at something and say, "Sure, I'll take that project on." And next thing you know, you're really in a big project.
You are. I found that I had to register it with the FDA. I have to have their permission to market it. That took quite a bit of work. I wrote a document that was about 28 pages long with photographs, charts, and everything else. And of course, then you've got to worry about advertising it, finding out where to advertise it, what your market is, preparing a brochures. It started a whole new business for me, one that I had never even thought I'd be involved in.
I imagine so. How long have you been involved in this, Ken?
The man came to me last January. We set a date for June 1st for our first production to have it on the market. June 1st rolled around, we were ready to go. And in June, we were very fortunate to be featured in the Professional Products News of the American Chiropractor magazine. So we had generated interest almost immediately.
Very good. Conrad?
Am I correct in assuming that the equipment that you're going to be showing us measures temperature?
Yes. It's a differential temperature meter, which means quite simply, if I can pick this up, we have two temperature probes here. And when they're placed on the skin, the meter takes temperatures on both probes. It compares the temperatures and it indicates by the movement of a needle which side is hotter. So it's called a direct contact temperature measurement device.
Could we do that now, Ken, with, say, Conrad's hand there, to pick up the difference on two sides if there is any?
Well, I can simply just by using my hand here. Let me turn it on and adjust the needle to 0.
I believe the viewers will get a better idea of exactly what you're talking about.
If I touch this probe, this finger is obviously warmer than the end of this probe, and so the needle should be all the way over to the other side.
Okay.
If I go to the other probe, then the needle should be swinging back, hopefully, to the other side of the meter. If I put both fingers on, eventually it will come back up to 0.
If both fingers are the same temperature?
If both fingers are the same temperature, yes. Theoretically, both of those fingers are the same temperature. And it should be coming back up slowly but surely. Is it?
Slowly but surely, yes.
Good enough.
Would that have an effect also on circulation then, Conrad, if you're taking temperature readings?
Well, yes, the implication would be that the one area is warmer than the other because there is increased circulation, or colder because there's decreased circulation. Thermography does that same kind of a measurement, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. I was just reading up on thermography a few weeks ago. It uses liquid crystal mats where they are placed directly on the body, and the body temperature turns those crystals on or off, so to speak, and it gives you different color scales. And you can tell by the intensity of the colors which areas of the body are warmer or colder. That gives you a big general view. This one can locate a very, very tiny spot, and that the large thermography mats may not indicate a small pinpoint of heat.
So this would be of greater interest then to, as Bill mentioned, a chiropractor.
Yes.
Or an osteopathic physician who is interested in localizing an area of... well, let me ask you this. As a physician, why would I want to use that equipment to find an area of pain when I can find that by pushing on the person?
Well,
what benefit would that be to me in my practice?
This meter can indicate exactly where that pressure point is. Is it possible to bring up the slide?
Yes.
Slide number 1. This is a schematic, I guess you could say, of the human nervous system. The yellow lines indicate the nerves. As you can see, they come to the middle, and in the middle, of course, is the human spine. If you have a spinal injury, and that would be seen on the next slide, slide number 2, shows where you have a pinched nerve due to a subluxation. Your patient might have a pain down behind his knee or up in his thigh, but the actual area of injury would be in the spine. If he comes to you limping, you're going to look at his leg first. By using this meter along the spine, you can find that there is an injury there because that injury will generate heat. And it may be a very, very small area, maybe not much larger than the end of a pencil eraser, but the T-meter will pick it up.
One area that I noticed before when we were at the health fair is the reactivity, the sensitivity on this, Ken. Instantaneous.
It is.
It's not where you would hold it and wait and then go someplace else and wait, but just scanning the spine as you did, it swayed back and forth instantaneously.
That's an important observation, I think. When Ken was doing this, I assumed that it was a matter of, there was time involved in watching the needle move.
Right.
But it usually moves more rapidly than that. Is that what it is?
Yes. In a normal spinal examination, your chiropractor should not be taking more than 5 seconds, 3 to 5 seconds, to run the meter the length of your spine. On some scales, this has 5 sensitivity ranges. Some scales, it's going to react very slowly because on that particular scale, we're looking for a differential of maybe a degree or 2 degrees or more. On the E scale, for example, we're looking at as small a degree variation as 1/20th of a degree. I can put my finger above the probe and not touch it on the E scale, and the needle will move across. If I turn it to the E scale and center the needle, all I have to do is touch the probe, and it should be going straight across to either side very rapidly. It is warm in here, so I can saturate the probes by moving back and forth like that.
Okay, and with moving the probe back and forth, we'll take a short break. We're talking about a device developed, I guess you could say, by Ken Matern and his company for subluxations and diagnostic procedures. We'll be right back. Welcome back. We're talking about various instruments. Right before the break, Conrad, I felt it important to clarify the sensitivity of that because it did not seem clear in your mind. You thought it was slow in responding. And with what I saw Ken doing before, it was just a matter of scanning the spine itself. Or any other area, I imagine, at that point.
True. At the convention where we were, a number of people asked me, well, is it possible to use that to take the temperatures of my temples at the same time and see if I have proper blood flow up there? I guess that was one of the topics of the convention. A lot of people were interested in that. I'm now working on developing some probes that you can use at a much more remote area rather than have them attached directly to the box.
As well.
Yes.
That could be used as a thermal device in for biofeedback, I would imagine.
Yes, you can. I have a reference probe and a biofeedback probe. You obtain both of them, put the meter on the E scale, which is the most sensitive, and you can do biofeedback experimentation with it.
Okay. Conrad, I'll bounce back to you for a little while.
You're early on in your work with this, obviously. I'm wondering if you've had any opportunity to work with acupuncture points with the probe, delineating points.
No, I have not. I really not have had the opportunity. I need to sit down and work with someone who is more familiar with that area. I do the electronics. I know about acupressure and acupoints, but I don't know where to locate them myself. It would be interesting to experiment with it and see what I can discover, though.
Yes, and I think that will probably come as you develop your company and your area of expertise broadens.
As time passes, I hope to do things like that. I also just want to get it out to as many clinics as possible and have them compare them to the devices on the market and have a good solid foundation so I can say, you know, my meter compares thusly with the competition's.
When you're saying, go ahead, Conrad.
Well, there are other modalities available then that do something similar.
Yes, there are, to the best of my knowledge, 11 on the market at the moment. Mine is, of course, the most recent. Mine is also on the very low end of the price scale. They run anywhere from $175 for a handheld unit to $725, $750 for a handheld unit. I've chose to have the $175 range rather than the high range. The circuitry is basically the same. The meters do basically the same thing. Technology has not changed that drastically that expenses should be that high.
When you're saying 175 to 700 something, you're saying the comparable markets.
The comparable market, there's one on the market, I won't name it, that is selling for $725. It has 3 sensitivity ranges rather than 5. It has a round shape rather than rectangular. My probes are adjustable by simply picking them out and moving them to another jack. Their probes, on the other hand, you have to hold the device in your hand, loosen a thumb screw, spread the probes apart, and then tighten it back down. And then it's readjusted to a different size spine. One result of that is the fact that the probes are not parallel at that point. And I feel for best contact, the probes should be parallel. And these are always parallel because they fit straight in and they come straight out. Also, should you damage one, you can send it back to me and I'll send you a new one because it's easily removed.
When you're saying adjustable, I feel that's an important point there too, the way you pull those out and put them back in again.
Well, not everybody has the same size spine. And my son was to the chiropractor, and he's a small boy. And the chiropractor took a T-meter, as a matter of fact, and put the probes on the middle and used it that way. Some people might have say a medium-sized spine, for lack of a better word. So you move the probes over one, and for standard use, you move it outside. And it's very quick and very easy.
Okay, you have another meter with you that you wanted to demonstrate too, Ken.
It's called the Professional. It is basically a remote type meter. It can be used in an office where you want to have your patient see what you are doing. So it gives your patient confidence to know what you are doing and how you are doing it. It gives your patient an idea of a better feeling about knowing it. If you have your chest x-rayed, you don't go look at the x-rays with the doctor and say, aha, I see a problem there. You never really know what was on that x-ray. They just say, well, it was good or it wasn't. Setting the meter across the room, if you get a spinal examination, you can see that needle move. And if it hits a sensitive point, you know it right away because you see it graphically right there. Your chiropractor can say, here's the spot, and touch that spot, and you know that he's right. So you know he's not giving you a line of guff, so to speak. And I think that's important because it gives you good confidence in your doctor. You know what he's doing, and you can see him doing his job right there, as well as feel it.
Okay, what are the other instruments? Basically the same thing, Ken?
Yes, the 3 T meters on the bottom are just standard Model A's. On the middle we have a standard Model A that has been adapted for remote table use. You can plug the T meter in, and at that point it registers on the larger box on the left of the display. If you pull the plug back out, then you can use the T meter as a handheld unit. So it's kind of a multi-purpose device. You can easily have the remote meter in one room of your clinic and just disconnect the meter and carry it away and use it as a meter in another room.
Okay, you mentioned before that this had to go through the FDA.
Yes.
What was the reason behind that?
It's a device used in the diagnosis. It's not a diagnostic instrument, but it's used in the diagnosis of ailments. I found that you even have to register a new type of thermometer. If you make a fever thermometer, you have to notify the FDA. Basically, what you're doing is tell them that you are building a reputable product that will not harm anybody, that it can be used confidently by professionals, and you also compare it to other devices that are on the market to say, I'm making something similar to this one that is already being made. It's called a pre-market notification. After doing all of that work, the FDA reviews it and determines whether or not you do have a safe device. If they feel that you do have a safe device, they give you permission to market it.
Was there anything beyond? Did you have a question, Conrad?
I just wanted to ask if you know, Ken, if the FDA's responsibility ends at that point. They are only interested in determining whether your device is safe. They do not make any determination as to whether or not it's effective, it's efficacious, it functions, it's useful. They don't make any determinations?
Not really. They just make sure that what I'm producing is something that's not going to hurt anybody, that is safe to use by a layman as well as a professional. They do set standards, and you have to meet standards. There are certain criteria that for various devices, depending on what it is, you have to meet to make the FDA happy. They wanted to know, for example, what the actual temperature ranges were. Even though the T meter does not measure temperature directly and give you a reading of, say, 87.5 degrees, they wanted to know how the sensitivity ranges operated and what general range of temperatures we were looking at. That's how I know I can safely say that this will measure 1/20th of 1 degree Fahrenheit on the most sensitive scale. We tried it.
And that was a necessity, is what you're saying?
Basically, it was a necessity.
What are the ranges?
The range for the A scale, which is the, I guess you could say, grossest scale, would be approximately 1.5 to 2 degrees for a full meter deflection, meaning from the 0 to either side.
And the rest will be going into after the break. We're talking with Ken Mattern on the T meter, as you're calling it, Ken. We'll be right back. Welcome back. I'll turn it right back to Conrad and right back to Ken. You can continue with the ranges.
We were discussing the ranges. The A range is very similar to the original Nervoscope device, which was developed a number of years ago. It was not solid-state electronic. It was not extremely fast, but it was able to locate subluxations and injuries of that sort. The A range is comparable to that. The other ranges just follow basically a linear scale till you get up to approximately 1/2 of 1 degree Fahrenheit on the E scale from a 0 to a full deflection. So you can extrapolate the rest just by going either way.
What you're measuring then is temperature differentiation. You're not measuring, you're not quantitating.
That's right.
Temperature.
We're not interested in what the temperature is. We're interested in where a difference is. If you have a spinal injury that is pinching a nerve, that injury will generate the heat. You want to locate that. Also, if you, say, have a pulled muscle, for example, the T meter will differentiate to you that that is not a pinched nerve because a larger area will have a higher temperature. So we're interested in the differentials and how fast the meter responds.
I have seen advertisements for various pieces of equipment over the years that have suggested that their use can determine whether or not a patient who is complaining of a workman's compensation-related injury is in fact having pain or symptoms. How might that relate with your equipment?
The T-meter can indicate the original injury by having that recorded at the proper time at the physician's office. That information can become available. Thermography is getting to a point where it can indicate at a later time whether or not there was an injury. It's interesting, I discovered in working with this that a fresh injury generates heat, but an injury that is old, so to speak, will degrade and break down, and as a result it will, in a manner of speaking, suck heat into it, and it can create a much longer lasting injury. On a much broader scale, using remote type probes, the T-meter could indicate where that injury is and the extent of it.
So that it might be, after a trial, utilized to prove or disprove a workman's compensation case.
It could be.
Yes.
You had mentioned, I believe, if I listened correctly before, you were thinking of tying this into a computer somehow?
Yes, computers.
Or can I mention that at this point?
Yes, yes,
okay.
Please do. Computers are my other line. I do data processing and computer programming. One thing I would like to do is adapt the T-meter so it could plug into a single board computer and that computer into a printer, so that you could do a spinal examination and have the computer take, for example, 2,600 temperature measurements. There are 26 vertebrae in the spine. It could then take 100 temperature measurements for each vertebrae. It could average those out and then print on paper in a linear fashion on a printed spine where the temperature is at each vertebrae. You can then, 1 week or 1 month later or whenever, when you do another spinal examination, have that to fall back on and see if there has been any improvement or not.
Have it as part of the record.
You could have that as part of the record. And of course then, if there was a compensation question, you could produce that record immediately and say, well, here it is, it's dated, it has the patient's name right on it, because the computer, of course, would do some other things along that line, date it, put the name on, etc., etc. So you would have a hard copy.
How far along is that project, Ken?
I'm thinking about it. I have not actually sat down at this point to design something like that. At the moment, I just want to get the T-meter off and running, so to speak. I've been at it officially for the last 4 months or 3 months on the market. I've got to get the market there before I can think seriously about putting a lot of money into a computerized type system.
Okay, but what you're saying at the same time is this will easily adapt
Yes.
to your thoughts.
This device could actually be connected to any number of devices in the future, depending on what we want to do. With computerization, you could hook it into anything. One thought that I had in mind was having a professional type meter that would make noises. It would indicate to you if you have an out-of-range scale. If you're using a scale that is too low and you have a very high temperature differential, it would beep for you, as well as it would tell you when you have your meter zeroed by beeping in, say, a slightly different tone.
Which would be simple with your knowledge of electronics.
Yes, very simple.
Okay, more questions, Conrad?
We've been talking about the use with osteopathic and physicians and chiropractors. What uses would you foresee that an allopathic physician might have for this type of equipment?
Unfortunately, you're beyond my range at that point. Electronics is really my field. I know enough of the chiropractic and osteopathic to discuss that half intelligently. I'd have to have that explained a little further.
Well, a standard medical physician.
Any place where he really wanted to check differences in temperatures for whatever reason. If a person has an injured hand, he may want to compare the temperature on one side of the injury as opposed to the other. It could indicate nerve damage, possibly. I had a gentleman come to me at a convention and say, one of my arms is colder, which one? And I very quickly indicated to him which one, and he said he had nerve damage at that point. You could probably take the meter and go along that extremity until you saw a temperature differential, and you could determine where that nerve injury may have originated.
All right, well, that answers my question. There are other uses that,
Yes, there are.
certainly can be, and you will probably be exploring those as time goes on.
As time passes, I want to look into every possibility, of course.
So along with subluxations itself, you're saying it could be a pinched nerve
Yes.
that would cause those, and that directly answers
Yes.
your question. Okay, we have only a couple, I was going to say minutes, but that's not true either, a couple seconds left. Is there anything else that you would like to say, Ken, at this point?
The T-meter basically is designed for the chiropractic. I cannot control who's going to buy it, though, unless I specifically state it has to be a physician. If an individual wants to buy it to use in their home to determine whether or not they might have a subluxation or just a pulled muscle, I can't really control that. But I would caution, if you do that, please, if there's any question, contact your doctor. Don't try to do something yourself. It's not a diagnostic instrument in and of itself, and you should not try to diagnose your own ailment. You may use it to see if you have a pinched nerve or just a tired or pulled muscle, but don't try to be the doctor yourself. Rely on a professional.
Great closing, and with that we have to close. I certainly hope that you enjoyed it, the information that Ken has brought us. We'll see you again next week. God bless you.
For additional information about today's program, write the Cooper Foundation, Post Office Box 2664, Lehigh Valley, PA 18001, or phone 215-HEALTHY. Your producer and host of today's program, Dr. William G. Cooper. Dr. Cooper's co-host, Dr. Conrad Malfair, Jr. Views expressed on today's program do not necessarily represent those of the Cooper Foundation or this station. This program has been a William G. Cooper presentation.